Hello, Chris Green here with the Flood Insurance Guru. Today we're here on the water. We're talking about East Coast and West Coast. You know, there's always been a big rivalry there. Whether we're talking about rap music, we're talking about NBA with the rivalries between the Lakers and the Celtics. Today we're talking about flood threats and how these are really two different worlds when it comes to coastal flood threats. You know, Florida, for example. When we think of Florida, of course, we think of hurricanes. It's the most common place in the United States hit by hurricanes. You know, it's a relatively flat state. It has a lot of flooding issues, not just for hurricanes, but those afternoon thunderstorms that cause a lot of flash flooding. So what about places like Glendon Beach, Oregon? You know, that's a coastal risk. When we think of it, what do we think of? Well, if you live on the West Coast, you might think of earthquakes. You might think of tsunamis. And so these two areas have some pretty different flood threats, but they're also pretty similar in the kind of damage that they can cause. For example, as we mentioned, you know, hurricanes are a big issue in Florida. That's the major threat. So what's the major coastal threat in places like Glendon Beach? Well, with new maps being updated in the last 5 to 10 years in that area, a major threat there has been cliff erosion. What happens is all these areas get eroded away, causing a lot more floodwaters to come inland than they normally would have, maybe even causing a home to fall off of a cliff into floodwaters. Then there's a threat of tsunamis, and there's still the threat of rivers nearby and lakes nearby that cause a lot of this seawater to rise as a result. So these are some pretty big differences in the East Coast and the West Coast. You know, when we're talking about flood threats in Miami, Florida, Tampa, Florida, Glendon Beach, Oregon, Lincoln City, Oregon, they can be pretty different, but they can also be pretty similar when they have the damage. So that's why it's really important that you understand, whether you live in the Florida coast, whether you live on the Oregon coast, the Washington coast, that you understand what your flood threats are and what your options are for flood insurance. Because remember, whether you live in Florida or Oregon, you've got the National Flood Insurance Program and you've got private companies. You know, there's a lot of private companies out there that can provide some additional benefits that FEMA doesn't provide, like additional living expenses if it's a residential property, maybe loss of use if it's a business property or investment property. So these are all important things to remember. So if you've got questions about flood insurance in Glendon Beach, Oregon, Lincoln City, Oregon, or other parts of Oregon, or on the East Coast, the West Coast, then click below to visit our website, floodinsuranceguru.com. You can also check out our YouTube channel, subscribe there, or go to our Facebook page, Flood Insurance Guru, where we do these daily flood education videos. Remember, we have an educational background in flood mitigation, which means we can help you understand flood risks like this one right here, your flood insurance, and mitigating your property long term to help you minimize flood losses and flood premiums. Thank you.